Hey gang, this is Deke McClelland. Welcome to Deke's Techniques. Now today I'm thrilled to be sharing with you what amounts to new design technology that works inside Photoshop, but it does not come to us from Adobe. Rather, it comes from a group called PixelSquid, from the same folks that brought us TurboSquid, in case you're familiar with them. And the idea is that it's a stock agency that sells 3D objects to 2D designers. So, for example, let's say you want this dinosaur right here, except you don't want to be looking down at him. You want to be looking up at him instead. And so you want to be able to rotate this dinosaur in 3D space without, of course, knowing anything about 3D. And then, because he looks like a kind of toy at this angle, you want to be able to render him out to a bunch of 2D layers inside Photoshop and then modify those layers so that he looks like a real dinosaur in the jungle against this photographic image, by the way, from the Fotolia image library. And so this is really super exciting stuff. Now, right now it's very new, so it's a little bit fragile. PixelSquid has a plugin panel that works directly inside Photoshop, but it requires Photoshop CC 2014 or later, and I could only get it to work on the Mac. But that doesn't matter. Whether you can get the panel to work or not, you can do everything on their website and get just amazing results like this. Here, let me show you exactly how it works. All right, so here's my final composition, which features a photographic image in the background, which comes to us from the Fotolia image library, about which you can learn more and get deals at fotolia.com/Deke. And then we have this dinosaur in the foreground, which is a 3D object from PixelSquid. And let me show you what that looks like. I'll go ahead and switch over to my web browser. And as you can see, I'm dialed into pixelsquid.com. Now, bear in mind, this is a website, so it could change dramatically by the time you watch this movie. But as things stand now, you want to start things off by creating an account in the upper right corner. And then you want to get the plugin. And that's going to take you to the Adobe Add-ons library, where you can go ahead and download the plugin for free. And if you have any problems, by the way, then you can return to the PixelSquid site, where they've got lots of information, not only about installing the plugin automatically, but if that goes wrong, you can install it manually as well. Another thing you might want to do is take a look at some of their training materials, all of which are quite interesting. But what I'm going to do is switch back to the landing page and click on View All Content. And that way I can take a look at the several thousand models that are available to us. I'm going to start with this guy right there, the grand piano. I'll just go ahead and click on it in order to load it on a dedicated page. And then all you have to do is just drag around inside the page like so in order to rotate that object to roughly any angle you like. So notice if you're underneath the piano, you're not going to see a shadow, but if you get on top of it, you will see a shadow. And this is a translucent shadow, of course, that you can blend with any image inside Photoshop. Now, inasmuch as it might seem like you're modifying the piano on the fly, what you're really doing is cycling through a bunch of different presets. So there's a finite number of angles available to you, but you don't have any control over the lighting, so everything's pre-lit in advance. Now notice along the right-hand edge here that you can download the image as a PNG file, complete with transparency, but otherwise flat, of course. Or you can download it as a multi-layered PSD file, which is extremely exciting. There's all kinds of stuff you can do that way. Or finally, if you've installed the plugin, you can just go ahead and click on the Add to Photoshop button right here, which will add the image to your lightbox. And so I can see all those images if I like by clicking on Lightbox, or I can just go ahead and switch back over to Photoshop. At which point, I need to load the plugin by going up to the window menu, choosing Extensions, and then choosing PixelSquid, assuming, of course, that everything is working properly. After which point, you'll see all the objects that you've loaded into your lightbox. I'm going to go ahead and make this panel wider by dragging on the left-hand edge here, just so that I can see big versions of my thumbnails. Now, you might notice that there is at least one missing, which is the grand piano. And to see it, I need to click on Refresh. And that's going to go ahead and add it to the group. If for some reason you decide you don't want one of these objects, then all you have to do is hover over it and click on the close box right there in order to remove it from your lightbox. But it's nothing you need to worry about. You can always bring them back later. And of course, that doesn't amount to a permanent deletion, because you can always go back to the site and retrieve that object. All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my flat background image here, and I'll add one of these objects to it by clicking on it such as this dinosaur skull. And then notice that you can drag directly inside the panel in order to rotate that object on the fly. Now, if I were to zoom in, let's say to 100%, maybe a little farther to make my point in video form, you're going to notice that this is a pretty low resolution image. For the high res version, go ahead and click on high res. And again, this panel is a work in progress, so things might change over time. But as things stand now, when you click on high res, you get a higher resolution version of that image. All right, I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out. And I want you to see over here in the layers panel that this is ultimately a smart object. But it's a special kind of object that you can modify on the fly, assuming, of course, that you have a live internet connection. But let's say this isn't really the image I'm looking for. I'll just go ahead and press the delete key in order to get rid of that layer. At which point, again, as things stand now, we continue to just see that skull and nothing more. If you want to see all the other objects, just go ahead and click on Add New in order to bring up a list of thumbnails. But let's say what I'm really looking for is an entire dinosaur. I'll go ahead and switch back to the site. And notice that you have the option to view collections if you like, or you can run a search. And so I'm just going to enter dinosaur and press the return key. That's the enter key in the PC. And notice this guy right here, the Deinonychus. That happens to be, if I go ahead and click on it in order to bring him up on screen, this is the actual dinosaur after which the velociraptors were modeled in Jurassic Park. And so Michael Crichton just liked the word velociraptor better, even though strictly speaking, velociraptors are much smaller. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that I want to add it to Photoshop by clicking on this Add to Photoshop button. Or again, you can just download the image as a layered PSD document. And then I'll go ahead and switch back over to Photoshop. In order to see that dinosaur, I need to click on a refresh button right there, and then he appears in the upper left corner, after which point I'll just go ahead and click on him in order to first download that object and then add it as a dynamic smart object. All right, now that's not necessarily the angle I'm looking for. So the first thing I'm going to do is make this guy way bigger by going up to the edit menu and choosing the free transform command. And I'm going to go ahead and link the width and height values to each other. And I'll change the width value to twice what it is now. It's 222% for some reason. I'll just go ahead and change it to 444%. That math is pretty easy. And then I'll press the enter key or the return key on the Mac a couple of times to apply that change. And now I'll just go ahead and command or control drag this guy over a little bit. And naturally, I want him to look better. So I'll switch to the high res view, which will end up re-rendering the dinosaur like so. Now at this point, he looks a little bit tiny. And a lot of that is because we're looking down at him. Also, of course, there's no ground for him to stand on inside this image. And so I'm going to go ahead and change this angle a little bit by once again dragging inside the PixelSquid panel. And then I will command or control drag this guy downward so that he's a little more menacing, so that his feet are out of the picture. And I can make him a little bigger as well. But at this point, what I want to do, now that I'm comfortable with the angle, I want to render him out as a bunch of Photoshop layers. And you do that by clicking on a little PSD icon. Again, as things stand now, you need to save your composition if you want to go ahead and replace this layer, the Smart Object layer, with a bunch of static Photoshop layers. Or if you haven't yet saved your changes, you can just click on this button here, Open as New Document. And that's going to go ahead and render out your layers to a new image file here inside Photoshop, which looks like this guy right here. And so I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And I'll go ahead and hide the PixelSquid panel as well so we can see things a little better. And notice, in addition to this subject flat layer, which represents the flattened version of this 3D object, potentially complete with translucent shadow. The only reason that this guy doesn't have a shadow is because we're looking at the bottom of his feet as opposed to looking down on the dinosaur. But in addition to this guy, which you can go ahead and turn off, by the way, we have these groups right here. And just to make them a little more obvious, I'm going to select the lead group, and then I'm going to go up to the layer menu and choose Ungroup Layers. And that way we can see these other group names. The most important of which, by the way, is this guy right here called Subject Layers. Notice if you turn it on, you're going to see that same composite image we saw a moment ago. The difference is if I go ahead and twirl this group open, I have access to all kinds of additional layers that I can pick apart and modify as I choose. And that, my 2D friends, is how you download and modify 3D objects here inside Photoshop, provided to us by the exciting new stock agency, PixelSquid.com. All right, so obviously very cool stuff, but it gets so much better. After all we've done so far is to take this 3D object and render it out to a bunch of 2D layers inside Photoshop, which is why next week I'll show you how to blend those very layers to create your own Jurassic Park. Terrifying stuff. Don't attempt it without me. Deeks Techniques each and every week. Keep watching.